our government, at least as it is currently configured, is basically a system of theft.
Welcome back to another episode of the Brian Licata Show. I'm here with my new friend, Spike Cohen. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Brian. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. I really appreciate you doing this morning, and a big thank you to Brian too on your end for setting it up. The other Brian.
Absolutely, the other Brian, yeah. the voiceless Brian. Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of I had a bunch of stuff kind of scheduled that I wanted to talk about, but I also wanted to leave it a little bit more open-ended. So you could say, really whatever you wanted to, and then I kind of wanted to just give you my position on libertarianism and, the avenue I'm coming from. And really, my goal with the podcast is to kind of learn more about the party.
Sure. Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Awesome. So, the first thing I want to say is, I found you maybe about 2 years ago or so online, and, it was the memes. The memes are the thing that really pulled me in. Every Saturday, I look forward to the Wholesome Sabbath meme.
Wholesome Sabbath memes, yeah. That's it's interesting. I love that that's what brought you in, but that you're not the first person to say that they came in because someone shared a Wholesome Sabbath meme. Because every Shabbat, Friday nights or Saturday mornings, I will share. Just a like almost sickeningly sweet, wholesome meme, usually with a puppy in it. Not always, but usually with a puppy in it. And because it doesn't get more wholesome than a puppy. And I'll share it, and people will be sharing it, and people will go and look at that, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's so funny," or "That's so cute," or whatever. And then they look at the rest of my posts, and they're like, "Oh my God." And it's interesting how, and I'll even see the people that'll be like, I came here for the wholesome memes. What the hell is this? And it's, me talking about whatever, political thing or talking about libertarianism. But it has worked. It started as just me a way of
like a joke or whatever,
posting during my idle time. But it has turned into a whole thing. It's brought people into libertarianism. I love it.
Yeah. That's definitely what got me in. I think what happened was I saw one of them, and then I clicked, and I'm like, oh, I think I know who this guy is. I'm like, Libertarian Party. I'm like, oh man, I didn't realize where it landed me.
Right.
So I want to give you a little background on myself. So I was fortunate enough to be, selected for the Congressional Page Program back in 2008, which is now a defunct program, but it was really cool. I got to live in DC. I got to work on Capitol Hill, sponsored by Frank Lobiondo, who's a retired Republican congressman from the 2nd District in New Jersey. And, I got down there. I knew a little bit about politics. I think I was more interested in just, getting away from a normal high school career to go down there, And
yeah, who wouldn't jump at that kind of an opportunity to be on Capitol Hill instead of in high school?
Yeah, it was amazing. We had, the congressional security badges and everything, and, we would get waved through security, and I'm going to school in the Library of Congress, walking across the street into the Capitol building. I got to roam through the catacombs of the Capitol building, pretty much with immunity,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a really, really great experience. But when I was down there, I kind of got this bad taste in my mouth for American politics.
I would imagine so.
I always go back to this one story. I remember I was sitting there, and on the floor there were two congressmen arguing about. It was renaming a post office. And I don't remember if it was in Arkansas, Nebraska. And they're going on for an hour about allocating this money to rename this post office. And as a kid, I'm like, isn't there bigger issues out here that we could be worrying about instead of this?
Naming a post office that's already exists. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh man. And, I guess my political beliefs, were shaped originally by my parents. And now that I've grown up, I've kind of been steered more towards the libertarian views, voluntary contributions, property rights, all that sort of stuff. So right. I wanted to ask you, how did you, I know a little bit, but I want to know what you have to say. But how did you get involved with the Libertarian Party?
So what brought me to libertarianism is really just being disabused of my previous notions by reality and being guided along by certain libertarians along the way. I actually was a neocon. So when I was a kid, or I guess when I was a teenager, when I was 19, 9/11 happened.
Right.
And I was horrified and scared. And, is this going to happen every day? Is this our new normal and all of that stuff? And I bought totally into the government and media narrative about why we were attacked, that the terrorists hated us for our freedoms. And, we needed to use the force of the American military to spread democracy around the world. And that was going to fix everything. And then, we'd all be free together. And I bought into it. And I believed that bombing the world would lead to peace and freedom and democracy, and it sounds stupid to say it now, but I 100% believed it, and believed it for many years. It was every bit as strong of an advocate as I am now for liberty. I was that strong of an advocate for neoconservative foreign policy. I unironically refer to myself as a neoconservative, and there were some very annoying libertarians, people like Ron Paul, Matt Kibbe, Walter E. Williams, when he would talk about foreign policy. And I agreed with them on a lot of things. I agreed with them when it came to things like taxes. I agreed with them when it came to things like regulations. I was increasingly agreeing with them when it came to things like the Federal Reserve, but they were just so wrong when it came to foreign policy. We needed a strong foreign policy to stop the Islamo-fascists from spreading their whatever around the world. And I completely believe that. And they made a lot of predictions about what would happen based on what's happened every time the U.S. government has engaged in imperial or any government has engaged in imperial war policy.
Right.
And then I watched all those things happen pretty much in the timeline that they said would happen, that we would not be welcomed as liberators, that we'd be treated as invaders and occupiers. And I shouldn't say we, our military. I didn't serve. I can't say I was robbed because I actually wanted it to happen, but I was taxed to pay for that to happen. And I was told that it would come out that all of the different pretexts that led to the invasion would all be proven to be lies, and that all happened. And it even continued to happen even after I'd already accepted it with the Afghanistan papers and things like that. But, and that, it would be used as a pretext to take more of our freedoms here and to spy on us and to rob us of our right to due process. And pretty much everything they said happened pretty much in the timeline of when they said it would happen. And I was very angry about that for a long period of time. Not a long period of time. For several months, I was very angry about that. And I realized one day the reason I was angry was because they were right and I was wrong. And there's a very easy way to fix that. No longer being wrong. And so that kind of took me on the journey from being a neocon to being a more of a kind of constitutionalist conservative, right, and eventually to being, my final level Super Saiyan libertarian that I am now, the only complete libertarian. And that's what led to ultimately to my being a libertarian. I joined the Libertarian Party much later on, but I've been involved in libertarian activism and messaging for a few years now. That started in earnest with my being starting my show, My Fellow Americans, and becoming co-owner of Muddy Waters Media and doing all the podcasting and shows and stuff like that. And it ultimately culminated in my becoming the vice presidential candidate last year.
Yeah, I actually saw a Facebook post. I don't know, you put up maybe a few weeks ago or something like that, but you were talking about, how you were angered, and then you tried to turn it, I guess, into something positive. And I'm kind of like at that point, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, because it's like, I see all this stuff going on now in American politics and around the world, and it just like, it's like I get up in the morning sometimes and I'm like, there's just a complete lack of critical thinking going on with anybody. And I'm a small business owner. I have a video production, podcast production, social media management company up here in New Jersey. And, I live in the Atlantic City area. So a lot of my business was based around the casinos. And when the COVID restrictions first came down, they, shut down all the casinos and virtually every business in the area. So
Right.
I was left without any work. I had started the business maybe a year before COVID. So I wasn't really at the point where I had like a lot of savings or a lot of,
Right, exactly. You would just,
I'm starting out, it's a new business. So when all these restrictions that came down, and, I'm a, 1099 contractor and self-employed, and all these things came down, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? Like the state and federal government is saying that I can't make any money.
Exactly.
Without giving me any sort of solution to what I can do about it. And it just like it's like a series of events like this that, are furthering me away from, trusting the system that is in place. And the only thing that I ever got offered from the federal government was a loan, like a low interest, loan.
Well, and the thing is, it's actually a double loan. So you're having to pay back that money, but you're also having to pay back for the fact that it was allocated in the first place. So you have to compound the interest that you pay off the bat with the interest that you're paying through the Federal Reserve loaning that money to the federal government. So it's actually a much higher interest loan than it would look like at first. Listen, there's really actually no reason to trust government or the system. And what happens is, once we realize, as libertarians, or really just as people who recognize that government is a shell game and a fraud, as that happens, we often become increasingly angry, because now we are able to accurately tie the issues and the struggles and the difficulties that we are facing, and that people we care about are facing, and that people in our community and around the world are facing, with the excesses and abuses and negligence of the state. And that can make you very angry, especially when the vast majority of people haven't made that connection yet. And when you try to tell them, they go, well, but government's here for the roads and the schools, so we need them. We government takes care of people. And you're like, no, government doesn't take care of people. Government is the reason why so many people need help and need being taken care of in the first place. You talked about you were robbed of your ability to work. But that's okay, because government gave you, what is it, $1,200 and then $600 and now $1,400. So what's that? $3,200 they've given you. Now, they also spent about $32,000 per person on all of those different bills combined. And you're going to have to pay that off with the interest, whether or not you got that $3,200. Government didn't help you. These are the things that get us really, really upset, especially, again, when most people are looking at us like, maybe you're taking it a little far. I think government's trying to help us here. And it's like, no, they're not. Here's the problem with that anger is, when everyone else is going along to get along and not quite making the connection yet, because again, we were there once. All of us were once one of those people who didn't quite get it yet, because they haven't gotten it yet. And because we're sitting here sometimes frothing at the mouth trying to explain how government has imposed this system on us, we look like crazies. It's not intentional. We aren't trying to look like crazies. But if you're in a room and everyone else, and let's say we're in a boat, and the boat is slowly headed off a cliff. Now, no one else can see this cliff, okay? And or not a cliff, I headed off a waterfall, okay? We're all about to die unless we change course, okay? And there's this one person who's familiar with this route, and because it's so frantic that it's happening, and because they're getting so frustrated with the fact that no one else understands this, they're standing in the center of this room on the boat and screaming at the top of our lungs, "You idiots! We're all gonna die!" Right? And everyone there is like, this guy sounds like he's nuts. What's wrong with this guy? Instead of trying to patiently explain, hey, we're on the precipice of we're all going to die because I'm familiar with this route, where if it were presented that way, people would go, oh, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. Maybe we should talk with the captain. Instead, because the person's frantic, because they're upset, because they feel like no one's listening, they're now screaming, "You morons, we're all going to die." And what ends up happening? The boat more than likely ends up going over, cascading over the waterfall, because that person wasn't able to accurately and articulately message what they were trying to say. And so what I tell libertarians is, we need to focus less on what we're against and more on what we are for. And here's why. Most people already know that there are problems going on and they need a solution. Now, it's important to explain to them how we got here in order to provide the solution, but the focus has to be on the solution. Two things happen there. The first thing that happens is you're now presenting our ideas in a way that actually connect with the person you're talking to. Instead of focusing on, when they say, oh, I'm worried about the cost of healthcare, and you go, yeah, government sucks. They made the cost of healthcare go up. Instead, you can say, yeah, here's how government made the cost of healthcare go up, why they're continuing to make it go up, and how we can fix that by getting them out of it and making the cost go down so it's affordable. Shifting the conversation to something that actually is helpful. Here's the second thing that happens. When we are focused less on what we dislike about things and more on what our solutions are, that reflects in everything else that we do. It completely changes our mindset. One of the reasons, in fact, the reason I had this change of mindset is when I was diagnosed with MS, one of the biggest things they told me was that you need to reduce your stress. You are raging through life with your business, with your politics, with everything. You are focusing on what you hate and raging through it. And that is not helping you. Stress is not good when it's not good in general, but it's especially not good when you have an autoimmune disorder. Your immune system thinks something is wrong here. And so I focused on what can I do to change the way I'm looking at things. And the biggest thing I saw was that I was focusing my life on everything that I hated and opposing it with every thread of my fiber and being, instead of looking at how do we fix this? How can this be made better? And it doesn't mean that I never get upset, because that's not natural. It doesn't mean that I never get outraged, because that's not natural. We should get outraged about bad things. We should get upset about bad things, but our focus on how we do something about it needs to be on messaging to people how we got here and then how we can get out of it. Being solutions oriented. Focus on what we love, a world set free, instead of what we hate, a world that is held in shackles.
Yeah, I really like that that philosophy. I mean, going back to what happened with my business, when I saw that I couldn't work anymore, I was like, okay, well, I can either stay pissed off about this and not get any money, or I could, go find another job, and find something that I can get into. And, fortunately, I had a background, doing like landscaping and like golf course maintenance and stuff like that. So I hooked up with a buddy of mine, and I got a really good full-time job, and I didn't really lose out on the income at all. But, how I just, if I would have just waited, I know that anger would have built up and.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And I've been talking to, just like friends, family or whatever. And to me, it seems like there's starting to be everyone who I talk to, about like policy issues and stuff pre-COVID, their mind seems to start to be opening a little bit more, especially when those COVID packages came out and they saw all the pork that was like stuffed inside of those things. Even people that I knew that are like, staunch supporters of the American, political system and the U.S. government were like, what the hell are they doing? These people see that the nation is kind of taking this downward turn.
Yep. And
then we're just throwing money all overseas, and it's not going in the pocket for everybody like that. So it's, now I was wondering, would you, like, if you were in power during this pandemic, how do you think you guys could have handled it, differently, or, looking back on it or something like that?
Well, first and foremost, we got to focus on what was done wrong, because there's multiple aspects to this. How it was handled initially, and then how it was handled after the fact.
Okay.
And the initial, in my mind, is the most important, because in any outbreak or pandemic or anything like this, the sooner that you are able to move initially, the better it is long term. The more you can stop the spread from going out of control initially, the better it can go long term. Well, we look at the fact that the federal government didn't allow COVID testing for nearly 2 months. In fact, I was one of the people I went to the New Hampshire primaries last February, and a few days later, I was very, very, very sick. And I went to a doctor, and now keep in mind, I was at the New Hampshire primaries. I was around tens of thousands of people from all over the world that come to see this spectacle of the New Hampshire primaries.
Right.
Okay. And I was there with Vermin Supreme. So we were there in close contact with thousands of people that wanted selfies with us. We were at the epicenter.
Yeah.
Probably the only people who got more attention there were Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. Were probably the only other people that actually had more people in their face than Vermin and I did. So if anyone there had COVID, we probably got it. And I went to a doctor. And I said, I'm sick, and they tested me for the flu, came back negative. I said, is it possible I have this coronavirus thing? And I remember the doctor said, maybe.
Right.
We don't have the guidelines to do the testing, and we're not allowed to do the testing yet. So just assume you have it, and stay home, stay, get better, drink lots of fluids, do all the stuff you would do with a cold or flu or COVID, and quarantine yourself for at least a couple of weeks. So I actually quarantined myself for like 3 or 4 weeks, pretty much from when I got, for at least a week or so after I was no longer feeling sick. Right. That was a voluntary measure I took myself. But the point is, we didn't know if I had COVID. Now, what if I had to work for a living? What if I had to continue going to work and I said, hey, listen, I don't know if I have this COVID thing or not, and I'm going to have to go and work. Now I'm spreading it to other people because I have to when I'm not being told otherwise. That was crucial time that was lost. Now, at the same time, while now the virus is spreading out of control, once they did start allowing testing for COVID in like March, which is way past when it was already here, because by the time we were hearing that it was in China, it was already here. That's right. Viruses that spread rapidly. They spread faster than the awareness that it exists, especially something like this that spreads pretty easily, like the flu does. What did the state governments do? Many of them started shoving COVID patients in nursing homes and mental health facilities. Mm-hmm. The owners of those facilities said, we don't have the protocols in place to protect our residents, some of whom are the very most vulnerable to disease out there. These are the people that will die if they get even a flu, much less COVID. We don't have the protocols to protect them from these COVID patients. They shoved them in there anyway. So all of a sudden we went from, I don't know if it's here yet, it might be here, I don't know, to there are thousands of cases and the fatality rate is near 10%. This is what led to the hysteria, intentionally or unintentionally. It led to the hysteria that eventually led to the things like the lockdowns and the mandates and all of these things that now we have the benefit of the data to show us that it did not work. Lockdowns did not slow down the spread of COVID and all of the massive social and human devastation that happened as a result of it, not to mention all the economic devastation. So let's go back to the beginning. What would we have done? Libertarians, first of all, would not have stopped people from testing for COVID. And we would not have been shoving COVID patients in nursing homes against both the wishes of those owners and any common sense and science behind how to deal with a virus. We would have allowed people to test for COVID. We would have already removed any kind of red tape and bureaucracy behind getting out things like vaccines or novel treatments. We would have allowed right to try so people could try things like what Donald Trump used to get better in a matter of days. Donald Trump is a man who is well into his 70s and has general bad health. He's not on death's door, but he's a fat man who we know from Walter Reed Medical Center that he has some minor heart issues and some cholesterol issues and stuff that comes with being a fat man in your 70s, right? Who eats McDonald's every day. And we now know that his oxygen was getting dangerously low. But then they gave him dexamethasone, I think I'm saying that correctly, and a couple of other treatments, things that are not yet approved for the treatment of COVID, and he had a miraculous turnaround. Like literally within a matter of days, he was out driving around, and within a matter of weeks, he was dancing poorly, but still dancing at one of his rallies. Like nothing ever happened. The man's acting like nothing ever happened. Matter of days and weeks later. We would have allowed right to try so people could try whatever they wanted to. By doing these things, it would not have stopped the lockdown. It would not have stopped the pandemic from happening. But it wouldn't have spread so wildly out of control in the first place. Hospitals and health centers would have had time to adjust without having to impose even short-term lockdowns. Mm-hmm. We would have empowered people with the information as it came in about how to best slow and mitigate the spread voluntarily. We would not have had to do these lockdowns because the virus wouldn't have been as bad to begin with. And we would have recognized that telling people to stay home unless they all have to go to the store at the same time all together in a very short condensed period of time that they're all allowed to do it. So everyone's now together, which is the exact opposite of what we want. Like all of the counterintuitive half measures that did nothing to slow the spread, none of that would have been done. We wouldn't have been shutting down small businesses and telling everyone to go to Costco and Walmart and Target instead, which did nothing to help. We would not have handed off trillions of dollars to crony businesses and given the average American a few $100 of their own money that they have to pay off with interest. We wouldn't have done any of that. We would have allowed the people who actually do the job of mitigating the spread of a virus and saving people's lives to do their jobs. And by doing that, we would have had a much better handle on this thing. And we wouldn't have had to do all of the other nonsense that didn't even work. And let's say we had stepped in even after the virus had started to spread out of control. We still wouldn't have done these lockdowns and mandates and everything else because we would have recognized that it intuitively doesn't make sense and won't work. And that it wasn't, and so the virus would have probably spread roughly the same as it did now, but there wouldn't have been as much massive additional corollary auxiliary damage to people's lives outside of the pandemic itself. And things just in general would have been better. I'm not going to say we can stop all disease because that's stupid.
Right.
Like there are going to be diseases, there are going to be outbreaks. Every single year, close to 100,000 people die from various diseases and outbreaks in the U.S. And this time, because it was a new novel pandemic, it was close to 500,000 or something, or around 500,000. So these things will happen. I believe it would have been a lot less, and there would have been nearly the additional devastation to our lives and our well-being from doing these misguided, counterintuitive, and honestly anti-science lockdowns. There was no science that said that we should do this.
Yeah, I mean, some of the science you could even argue, would say that, keeping people together, close in their homes was actually worse.
That's how it spreads. So the World Health Organization put out something back in October, reiterating their opposition to long-term lockdowns. They said a lockdown is supposed to be something for like 14 days. That was 15 days to slow the spread. The purpose of 15 days to slow the spread is and meanwhile, I don't support this either. But the purpose of a lockdown was a temporary thing to lock everything down, to give hospitals and health centers time to retool and get ready. These long-term lockdowns did the opposite. They shut down hospitals. They told hospitals, you can only treat COVID patients, which operates at a loss. You can only do something that operates at a loss. Even though you have the protocols in place to protect non-COVID patients, people getting cancer screenings and MRIs, people like me, I need an MRI every year for my MS, MRIs and chemo and treatments, even though those are the things that actually allow you to continue to stay open because they're what you make your money on. And even though you have the protocols in place to protect everyone, protect the non-COVID patients from the COVID patients, the same governments that just shoved COVID patients into nursing homes told hospitals that they couldn't do what actually allows them to continue operating. So the hospitals shut down. The lockdowns actually made us less capable and less ready to deal with an upsurge in the pandemic. And I traveled across the country last year campaigning. I talked to doctors and nurses who were working retail and working for like Uber Eats and stuff like that because everything was shut down, including their hospitals. The lockdowns were absolutely stupid. They were stupid from the beginning. I was right there on that couch. You can't see it, but I was right there on that couch voluntarily quarantining and making anti-lockdown videos over a year ago. And I remember when I first made the lockdown videos, some of the responses were people going, "You idiot, lockdowns are never going to happen here." And within a matter of weeks, I was still making anti-lockdown videos. And some of those people would say, "You idiot, you're going to kill everyone if you go outside." This is how quickly things change. But the lockdowns were foolish. They made no sense. No one could ever explain how they would work. The health experts were saying they were a bad idea, except for the ones that were being paid off by the government, and they were never able to actually change anything. Florida and California have similar climate and weather. They have similar population distribution, and they have had almost identical rates of the spread of COVID, even though Florida had almost no lockdowns and California had some of the strictest lockdowns. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I was down in Florida like 2 weeks ago on vacation with my fiance, and it was, everyone wore a mask. If you were, in a restaurant or, kind of like walking around. People weren't really wearing them on the street or anything like that, but it was wide open. The businesses, I think actually I saw something that some of these businesses or even seating, the restaurants in particular, seating more people than they did before, because now they have all these, they're able to seat people outside in like the street where they weren't able to seat people before. So their business is doing even better. But, some of the things that made me sick during the pandemic was watching, how Trump wanted to block off travel from China. And then you got Nancy Pelosi over here saying that, Trump is xenophobic, and, she was down in like Chinatown and telling people to come on down. There's no problem here. This was like late January, maybe February of 2020.
Yeah.
And then, weeks later or a month later, I don't remember what it was, she's then attacking him for not doing something about it sooner, and then gets caught sometime over the summer, maybe like getting her hair done in a salon when they're all supposed to be closed. And then you got the governor of California eating out at a restaurant inside and saying that, he wasn't there. It was outside or indoor or whatever the hell he was saying. And then who else was it? Maybe it was the mayor of LA.
Gretchen Whitmer did it. The mayor de Blasio did it.
Yes.
They put out lockdown orders. They threatened, punitive measures against anyone who violated them, and then they routinely violated them and occasionally got caught violating them, which proves that not only do they think that, we already knew that they thought they're above their own edicts. That's nothing new. That's existed for, millennia. We already knew that. But this proves that they know it's BS too. If they really thought that their measures were protecting anyone and protecting their lives, they would obey their own edicts to save their own lives and to save the lives of the people they care about and to not spread it. They know it's garbage. That's why they violated it. I want to talk about the China thing because, viruses spread virally, and I'm not saying that to sound like I'm condescending, but the idea that once we heard that there was this virus in China, it was already here. When you think about just the sheer amount of travel that happens across the planet, it might not have even come here from China at that point. The reality is, by the time we know, hey, there's this virus that's been around for like a month or so in China, by then it's everywhere. It's coming in here, not just from China, but from France and from Italy and from every other country. We've got, however many hundreds of thousands of flights coming in and out every single year. So the idea of let's stop travel from this country once the virus is already here, it really doesn't change much. And I will say, calling it the China virus and all of this stuff, there is an aspect of, I don't think it was necessarily racially motivated. I think it was nationalistically motivated. Trump had an axe to grind with China on things like trade,
of course,
foreign policy, and things like that. So this was something he could dunk on them with. If it had happened in, I don't know, if it had happened in another country, he would have called it the France virus if it had originated from France. This was about using this as a dunk on nationalism. Now, it did lead to people being scared of Asians and thinking they'd be more likely to get COVID from an Asian person or whatever. It led to that as well. But the reality is, the way that a virus spreads is, this is not Ebola where it spreads in a very difficult way from person to person, and where a short-term blocking of travel from a specific country can greatly reduce the chances of it spreading, or having some kind of mitigation efforts in place for people that are coming from that country can keep it from spread. This is something that spreads like the cold or the flu. Well, not the cold because that's airborne, but the flu. Like literally, if you're within a few feet of someone for a long period of time, or they're coughing near you or something like that, there's a good chance you're going to get it. When something spreads like that and it's unknown about for the first few weeks of its existence at the very least, then you're not gonna put that genie back in the bottle once it's out there. So I do want to say that. Now, to try to accuse him of being racist for it, again, I think it was more for nationalist populist policy reasons than racially motivated. But again, Nancy Pelosi, for her to like you said, she went and got her hair done. And then I think she got caught doing something else again. Gavin Newsom's been caught twice. Again, this shows us not just that they are, they believe we're the peasants to obey their rules and they can do whatever they want, but it also shows they know it's a bunch of garbage too. Like if I tell you, hey, listen, if you don't do X, you're going to die, or you're going to cause other people to die, or you're going to get very, very sick and cause other people to die. So don't do X. Okay. If anyone does X, they might die. And then I immediately go and do X. What have I just proven? I don't believe what I just told you.
Right. And then it's just like, the thing I was talking about, like with Trump and Pelosi, is just like, instead of trying to figure out the solution, they're just, they're in like a pissing match, and that's,
always. Yeah.
And that's all it is. Instead of trying to find some sort of solution or something, they're just, trying to catch the other guy doing something that they shouldn't be doing.
Of course.
And it's like, it's like, how are we ever supposed to move forward if this, this is the kind of stuff that's happening?
Well, they don't want us to move forward.
Right.
The purpose of the blatant hypocritical partisanship that we see from Republicrats is it's a good cop, bad cop routine. So if you and I are trying to con a bunch of people into thinking that, into going along with what we want to do, it might be easier, instead of us coming together and forcing them all into it, it might be easier for us to split that group of people into two, and you pander to one side and I pander to the other side. And we say stuff that makes, each of us say stuff that makes our group like us and the other group hate us. And we're constantly pretending to bicker with each other and constantly pretending to, argue with each other on the most stupid and trivial and meaningless of things. And then when it comes time for people to choose which way they want to go, which side they want to pick, we go, and both sides are going, well, I don't really like what Spike has to say, but I can't stand Brian. Or I don't know, Brian seems really dishonest and untrustworthy, and I don't know if I like him, but that Spike guy, screw him. And then we both go to our bases and we go, hey, listen, I know you don't like me, but if you don't go with what I'm saying, you're gonna have to deal with that guy over there. That's good cop, bad cop. That's lesser evils. And that's what Republicrats do. Now, we just saw what happened. They just spent $32,000 per person. If you combine all their different stimulus bills and Federal Reserve actions and executive actions, it amounts to roughly $32,000 every American citizen, not just taxpayers. This includes children. This includes people on pension, everyone, people in prison. Every single American is working out to roughly $32,000 and rising. I mean, they're going to spend more. You may have gotten $3,200. This was passed. Each of these were passed in a broad, bipartisan manner with all of the major players supporting it, including Trump, including Biden, including Pelosi, including whoever the House Minority Leader is, I'm forgetting at the moment, including McConnell, including Schumer, including all the major governors. Everyone supported it. They may complain about this specific thing or that specific thing, but when push came to shove, they supported it. And the things they complained about weren't the main thing. You're being given possibly $3,200 and getting stuck with a loan for $32,000 while my landscapers are outside right now. But that was done bipartisan, right? These people who, are constantly bickering and they're in a battle for the soul of America. When it's time to hand off money to cronies, when it's time to screw you over, when it's time to spy on you, when it's time to throw you in a cage, when it's time to commit mass murder around the globe, when it's time to do clandestine operations to support terrorist groups and drug cartels, when it's time to tell you whether or not you have the right to keep and bear arms or whether you're even essential, they work together immediately in lockstep. They're all the same side. Partisanship is good cop, bad cop, to give the illusion of choice. The only choice, the only true binary is the Republicrats or someone like the Libertarians who want to kick all those clowns out of office and take all of that power and freedom and money that you've been robbed of, that has not just violated your rights, but has also made your life harder, and give it all back to you. Take all that power and put it back in the hands of the people where it always damn well belonged.
Yeah, those values that you're talking about and those ideas really remind me of, what the country was originally even founded on. Like the issues that I have now with the taxation, surveillance, even going to like the drug war, or like immigration issues, or anything like that. Like some of these things are the same reason that we seceded from the British Empire.
Fought a war. Yeah. Like if you read the in the Declaration of Independence, it starts with a list of grievances, basically. The king has done this, he has done this, he has done this, he has done this, he has done this. And if you read that list of grievances, and I remember reading this, I think in 6th grade for the first time.
Right.
And just my basic understanding of government, looking at it and going, aren't they doing all this now? And if you read all of it, that's all stuff that our government does now. Yeah. And then you can add stuff to it too, because back then they didn't really have
for the benefit of the people.
Well, benefits or whatever, but you can add additional things that they do now that they would have never even dreamed of doing then or not had the technology to do. But yeah, no, it's pretty much across the board that the reasons for this group of people to commit treason and engage in a war against the most powerful empire at the time on Earth, and arguably at that point the most powerful empire in human history. Mm-hmm. At that point, right, or up till that point, that's all stuff that's happening now. The difference is now they've learned to couple it with free stuff and benefits and protection and safety, as opposed to just saying, hey, I have the divine right to do this, so you have to go along with it. Now they go, well, this is for your own good. Harry Brown was the Libertarian presidential candidate in 96 and 2000. In fact, Joe Jorgensen was his vice presidential running mate in 96. And Harry Brown said, and I always mess up this quote, but basically government comes in, breaks your legs, takes your wallet, and buys you some crutches with your own money.
It's a good quote.
This is where we are, right? Like the government hobbles us, robs us, gives us back a little bit of a few crumbs from the loaf of bread they've stolen from us, and then says, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have these breadcrumbs and that crutch that we got you. And it's like, no, if it wasn't for you, my legs would be fine. I'd be walking down the street happily, and I'd still have my loaf of bread in my wallet. So I'd like my wallet and my bread back, and you're going to need to fix these legs. The reason, because a lot of libertarians, or some libertarians anyway, got upset when I would say that if you're being given a check by government right now, go ahead and take it. They're like, this is stimulus spending, it's deficit spending, and I'd say, yeah, that's true, and it certainly isn't good, and we certainly shouldn't be allowing it. But the reality is, when government robs you of your ability to be able to thrive, when government robs you of your ability to be able to earn a living, when government puts you in a situation where you cannot afford your basic needs, they owe you money. And yes, you are having to pay back what you get. But the reality is, it would be better if they hadn't done all of that to begin with.
Right.
And the other reality is that to this day, the tweet that has been the most viral is the one where I broke down, not very detailed, but in very roughly broke down. You're getting $600. 600 times 328 million is, gosh, I can't even remember now, about a quarter of the cost of this bill. Where do you think the rest of that money's going? And also, once you factor in that all 328 million Americans aren't getting it, right, it's more like, I think 180 million are going to get it. Now you're really getting screwed. And also, you're going to have to pay interest on all that. Here's a few examples of where it is going. Here's some crony corporations and big government agencies it's going to. Oh, and by the way, the reason that they're even doing all of this in the first place is because they shut you down, told you whether or not you're allowed to go outside for weeks. It ruined everything, and so now they're robbing you to give you a few bucks back. The whole thing is a sham. And the sooner that we recognize that our government, at least as it is currently configured, is basically a system of theft. It exists. Its main purpose is to rob you in order to give to the cronies who put the people in power in their offices. Mm-hmm. It's a giant con game. It's a giant pyramid scheme.
Yeah, I always kind of compare it to the mafia, because that's kind of how the organization. That's how it's set up. The mob used to lean on business owners to get a percentage of their take for protection, and ran drugs and set up a homegrown policing system. Like there's really not that much of a difference. Like the organizational structure is there. It's similar. Now, do you see any way of us getting away from this I guess one party system is you. I would call it a two-party system, but you kind of called it the one party. Was it Republicrats?
Right.
The
Republicrats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I see any way to get out of this? I think number one, we need to message. Yes. The short answer is yes, I do. And here's why I'm very optimistic. I think that we are about a generation away from government being made obsolete by the blockchain. If you look at where Bitcoin has gone, in just the last 11 12 years, not quite 12 years that it's existed, it went from like a joke thing that people handed each other thousands of them and it cost 100,000 of them to make a pizza, to now there's serious discussion about it eventually becoming the world reserve currency. Okay, that's just currency. Blockchain is not just cryptocurrency. That was just the first thing that went out because it was the easiest proof of concept. Blockchain is coming up with solutions like that for everything. Mutual aid and protection, settling arbitration and settling of disputes, systems of commerce protection, pretty much everything that government claims that it's needed for, blockchain is creating. And right now they're in their infancy, in the same way that Bitcoin was once in its infancy. And if you looked at some of those solutions now, you'd go, that looks cute, but is this really viable? That's what they used to say about Bitcoin. If you look at how technology goes, it always gets better and better and better and better. And blockchain's no different from that. Government is still going to be government 20 years from now, but blockchain will be that much more advanced from what it is now. We will eventually reach a point where even if government insists on continuing to exist and insists on continuing to try to force people into it, it's going to become more and more irrelevant and obsolete. People will go to mutual aid from blockchain to get help because they'd rather not have to deal with the government bureaucracy and paperwork. We'll use encrypted cryptocurrencies because that way we don't have to pay taxes on it. There's nothing government can really do about it. We will use a blockchain to dispute our settlements and arbitrate our disputes because it works better and costs less, and we don't have to wait months to get satisfaction. We will go to blockchain because it'll work better. And eventually, government won't have a way to fund itself. It'll try to impose itself on us by force, but there's not any way that it can do that if no one's funding it. And the only thing that government will be able to do is something that if it could do, it would have already done, which is stop the blockchain. The only way you can stop the blockchain is by shutting off the internet. And the only way you can shut off the internet is by turning off all power for everyone forever, which they're not going to do.
Right.
So the reality is, I believe that blockchain is going to make all of this obsolete within a generation, maybe two, but probably really just one generation. And really all we're doing right now is harm reduction until we get there. So I'm very optimistic because of that. Now, pre-blockchain singularity taking over everything. Before that, in the now, we have to look at why I'm optimistic about now. I believe I just went around the country, 35 states, something like 100 campaign stops, met tens of thousands of people. We intentionally marketed to normies, non-libertarians. Libertarians knew I was going to be in their town, right? So I don't need to tell them, or we'd tell them, but it wouldn't. That's not where we'd primarily market.
Not your focus. Yeah, I get that.
It wasn't my focus. I didn't show up to Oakland or to Minneapolis or to Miami or any of these places to have a bunch of cheering fans. It's great to have cheering fans, but and they were there. There were cheering fans there, but that's not why I did it. I could have done that from home. I could have had people cheer me on from home. I went there so that we could tell everyday people who had never heard of the Libertarian Party that someone who was running for vice president was showing up, sometimes on a big bus that had Joe Jorgensen's face on it, that we were running for office. Come and hear what we have to say. And in fact, I'm going to do at least an hour of Q&A. Come ask me your toughest questions. Okay? When I would hear people ask me questions like, what about the roads? What about education? What about healthcare? What about my children's future? What about the economy? What about the cost of living? What about police brutality? What about whatever they came out to talk about? What about COVID? What about the lockdowns? And I would give them our answers. And there's nothing magical about me. I'm just solutions oriented. I give solutions oriented answers. I explain what the problem is, how we got there, and then I talk about how the solutions are to get us there. And I empathize with the person in front of me because I understand that they have valid concerns. And by doing that, sometimes taking just a couple minutes answering someone's question, I would watch thousands of people across the country, one at a time, few at a time, have these light bulb moments where they go, oh, that makes way more sense than anything anyone else has told me about this. We can all do that. It takes us no longer arguing and raging at people, and instead just listening to them, empathizing with them, explaining how we got here, and then taking them on the journey to how we fix it. When we do that, we have the best ideas. And when we do that, we can bring in people by the millions. We can change this very quickly. We can have a very quick snowball effect that comes from showing people in our community. Not everyone's going to be on national television, but you can do it in your community. You can do it with your loved ones. You can give them those light bulb moments. They get excited and start giving other people light bulb moments. This can happen very quickly and very intuitively, and we don't need the media system to do it. We don't even need social media to do it. We make these connections with people that we already have connections with, and we tell them the message of liberty. And when we do that, we set the stage for people. Instead of talking about, well, what should government be doing about this? And what can government give me to help me with this? Instead, now they're focusing on government created this problem. How do we get them out of it so we can fix it? How can we fix it? How can people who actually have a stake in this thing and who know how to fix it, how can we get the shackles off of them so that they can go and fix it? When that happens, not only do we make it to the debate stage, not only do we get libertarians elected by the thousands at every level of government, not only do we eventually have libertarians in the White House and in Congress and Senate and governors' mansions and everywhere else, but more importantly, even before all of that, the American people say, I'm sick of this. I don't believe you. You've been conning me. I knew that guy over there was conning me, but now I realize you're conning me too. I realized that the people I didn't like on the other side were conning me, but now I know you're part of that con too, and I'm not going to let you con me anymore. So I'm very hopeful. Yes, we can do this. And right now, our main focus needs to be on spreading that message of liberty and getting involved locally with your local Libertarian Party affiliate and seeing how how you can help them and people that are running for local offices to get that message out there.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job of that too. I mean, just your stance, the memes, the accessibility. Like if I would have, sent a message to, any Republican or Democratic member of any office in New Jersey, I can guarantee you none of them would have accepted the interview. Like absolutely none of them would have accepted the interview. So, like I couldn't, like I remember even talking to politicians when I was a page and having a conversation with some of these people. It's like you're not talking to a real person. Like you're getting whatever persona, they are trying to project. And even as a kid, especially as a kid, like you can see through that stuff fast. At least I can. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, because I felt like we had
of course,
an actual, like a normal, human level conversation that I don't think I would have
with a human, like an actual human discussion with two human beings talking like humans. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. And I yes, children get it, adults get it. Anyone, the trope about politicians I hate calling myself a politician. I'm a politician. Let's know the strict definition of a politician. I am someone who has run for office and who continues to, I guess now I'm more of a public figure / political pundit, but whatever. If I ran for office again, I'd be a politician again. Anyone calling me a politician, that is an apt description for me. The reason that politicians get the rap that they do isn't because of unfair treatment or miscategorization. It's because politicians are phonies. The vast majority of politicians act like how you're describing, right? Mm-hmm. They've got that persona. They've got that thing that they go out in front of people and they go, yes, I believe that. I agree with you. Every day I wake up. And it's all that nonsense. And the reason they do that is because it's focus group. This is my landscaper. I'm loving it. Yeah. I should have remembered that
it's the character of the show
today at 10:30.
Yeah, it's all good.
Every a politician, the reason they're doing it is because it's focus group tested and poll tested. If they just do the thing and do this with their hand and say things in a measured way that makes people think that blah, 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 then they can get away with it.
People go for it
because
too.
If they had to tell the truth,
crazy.
They would. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, and people just, they bite into it, which I don't understand at all.
Well, what's weird is they bite into, you're not going to meet, there are very few people that you will meet who voted for Biden or Trump and who will listen to their speeches and go, that was so beautiful. And then if you ask them, what do you think of politicians? And they'll say, I think they're liars. I think they're
you're
scum.
You're right about
I think
that.
they're phonies. I think they're robbing all of us. Well, what do you think of Joe Biden? Well, he's better than Trump. That's where they get
he's better than Trump.
So going back to that analogy of,
I had that.
if you and I are dividing a room of a group of people by playing good cop, bad cop. Now I'm doing my phony politician thing with them, and they go, man, Spike is such a phony. God, he's so full of crap. Look at him. He's sitting there. He doesn't believe what he says. But then I go, that guy, Brian, sucks. And they're like, yeah, Brian sucks. Now they like me, right? And you're over here doing the same thing. Guys, I believe the blah, 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 blah. And they're like, man, Brian is crap. And then you go, and Spike is terrible. And they're like, yeah, screw Spike. This is how they get people. So they don't like you, but you're a lesser evil. And that's what's happened with Trump, with Biden, with any of these people. They create this narrative that, well, I'm one of the good ones, or I'm at least better than that guy over there. And by doing that, by keeping people divided, imagine if the majority of Americans, or actually the majority of Americans do recognize it. That's why most of them don't vote. But imagine if the majority of voting Americans looked at all politicians the same way. The scam would be over. Because when I show up, I want people to be skeptical of me. When I show up and people go, wait a second, you're a politician. Politicians are full of crap. Answer me this, and this. I will happily answer it because I want them to be skeptical of me. Even after I've gotten their approval, or they think I'm right, or they love me, or whatever, I still want them to be skeptical of me. I love when I'll post something and people in my comments will say, man, I love you, but I don't agree with you on this take. Good! You are not my follower. I am not your overlord. Right. Be skeptical, question things. And so I think it's important that we do that.
Yeah. And it's all right if you don't agree,
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's actually good if we don't agree.
Yeah.
If you ever find yourself in a group where everyone agrees on everything all the time and no one ever dissents, that's called a cult. Please leave. Run away.
It's very boring too.
It's also boring. It's boring, and then you guys may end up all like killing yourselves together. Like, go away before it gets weird.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I definitely learned a lot. I'm going to be looking, further into the, libertarianism.
I saw you taking notes there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually cutting up some notes, about Henry Brown and some clips that I want to put out too. I was getting some timestamps.
It's actually Harry Brown.
Harry Brown.
But yeah. If you look up Harry Brown, and it's Brown with an E at the end. He's an incredible guy. He is, Ron Paul gets the attention that he deserved. Harry Brown doesn't get the attention he deserved. He was incredible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Do you have any few last words you want to give to the audience? How to find you? I know you got your social media handles up there, but anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So the main places to reach me are Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I probably need to add Instagram there too. That's also literally Spike Cohen on Instagram. I have a website coming out soon, spikecohen.com. That will be up probably later this month. But if you follow me on those social media, you'll be able to find me. My podcasts are on a platform called Muddied Waters Media. You can find that everywhere, all podcasting platforms, all social media platforms. And I'm also traveling the country this year. I'm not in a different state every day like I was last year, but I'm in a different state almost every weekend. And I'm going to libertarian events, state libertarian conventions, to spread the message of liberty, to get people excited about running for local offices, to just to create a blueprint for how libertarians can win and win more, and be able to actually change the conversation in this country. And if I'm, follow me on these social media, and if you find that I'm planning on coming to anywhere near where you live, come on out, come and see me. I do Q&A everywhere I go. I try to do at least a half hour to an hour of public Q&A. And then, when I'm mingling about with the crowd, I do even more, direct one-on-one question answering. Right. I'm an open book. Come ask me all your toughest questions. That question where you're watching this and you go, yeah, but he'd never have an answer for this. That stupid libertarian. He doesn't know how the world works. He'd never have an answer for that. Come on out and ask me your question. I can't wait to answer it for you. And thanks for having me on, Brian.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Spike. I really appreciate it. And hope you enjoy the rest of your day, man. All right.
Absolutely, man. You too.
All right, thanks.